It's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Doron Dekel. He's the CEO of ClaroNav, makers of Navident and NaviENT. For 35 years, Doron has led the development of many pioneering medical visualization and surgical navigation technologies. Amongst them, the first interactive and the first real-time medical 3D visualization system, the first user-programmable CT MRI CAT scanner UI, freehand real-time 3D ultrasonic visualization, the first optical motion tracking system based on pattern recognition, automatic detection of colon polyps in CT, the first automatic full-body identification of patient anatomy in clinical CT, the first commercial surgical navigation system used for guiding brain surgery, NaviENT, a compact and affordable sinus and skull-based navigation systems, and 2 generations of Navident, the market leader dynamic dental navigation system. Doron is also the co-CEO of ClaroNav, a medical imaging processing company he co-founded in 2001. ClaroNav bootstrapped itself on its own profits to a lucrative exit in 2015, then rebooted itself again to rapid growth in surgical navigation in the dental market. The company is still wholly owned by its founders and its employees. Computer-guided free-handed surgery with the Navident dynamic navigation system enables implant dentists to take precision to a new level without a physical guide. He has long track record of successfully developing and or leading the development of many pioneering advanced medical visualization and surgical techniques. First of all, I got to ask, you got a picture on the wall of Albert Einstein behind you. Was your favorite subject math or physics?
Computer programming, actually.
Computer programming.
I was pretty good in math and physics, but I just love the whole logical problem solving that's involved with the.
And what was your first language in programming?
C.
C. And how?
I wrote my first programs on cards, and I kind of put them in boxes and carried them to the shrine in the back where they will stick it into the computer, and then they give me back a printout, and I had to sit on the printout and see whether I got it right or wrong.
And how old were you?
When I started programming, actually, I think I started programming when I was 14, but didn't have very good access to computers at those times. There were huge mainframes that cost millions per hour. But I got really more into it in the mid-'80s, when I started my studies in the Technion.
So, a lot of people say they're not bilingual, but they know English, but they know math, they know programming. What you said your first, what was your first language? Your first human language?
Hebrew.
Hebrew. Then what was your second language?
English, Spanish, Japanese, but mainly Hebrew and English.
Hebrew, English, and then what computer languages are you speaking? C?
I have a whole bunch of them. Today when I program, mostly in C#.
C#. And do you think Python is going to be the major language in artificial intelligence, or not really? I mean, languages come and go. What do you think of AI? And what do you think of Python? Everybody thinking it's going to all be done in Python.
Well, Python is a great language, but it's designed to be interpreted. So if you want something to run really, really fast, you have to go to a lower level language. I personally didn't program in Python. My brother actually works on Wall Street and programs decision making in buying and selling stock.
And what language is he doing it?
So he's using Python, but this is because performance there is not as important as quickly modifying the program. But I don't think the programming language matters that much. It's quite easy to switch different languages if you're familiar with the principles behind.
Well, if you were a grandpa and you had 5 grandkids, and what would you recommend their first language be?
It depends what you're trying to do. A lot of people that work in AI, for instance, don't really do much programming at all. So they're just collecting data and annotating it and feeding it into libraries that they get for free from Google or Amazon or things like that. So For people who are working in AI programming is not that important, but for the stuff we do, there's a lot of massive programming that's being done in an environment where you need to go between low level and high level, and C# is a great language for that.
So you'd recommend the grandkids start at C# as their first language?
Again, I think it's not a good first language.
What's a good first language?
I'm not sure I'm an authority on that. Python could be a good first language. But,
really? Python could be a good first language?
Yeah, it's a very simple language, very straightforward. Everything is an array, and you're just manipulating them. Yeah.
So
I'm not an expert on this. I don't want to.
Well, I'll tell you what you are an expert on, and that is navigation, robotics, all this stuff. And I noticed that with this coronavirus breaking out, when they came to the hospitals, they didn't want to send any humans back. And my gosh, do you see how quarantining is going to be a big place in robotics in the future when you have someone in the back room with Ebola virus and you don't want to send in a LPN to go do something? You're just going to send in AI.
Well, I haven't thought about it much. We don't see that as a major motivation for robotics because it's relatively rare and unpredictable and so on. And in the OR environments, people can just protect themselves. It's relatively easy to do.
So what are you most excited about today? What are you most passionate about going on in your company today?
I'm most passionate about making those systems really easy to use. I think that's really the Achilles heel of dynamic navigation. It's very similar to GPS in concept, where you set up your destination and then you set up the map, and as you go, you look at the map and how well you're progressing, and you take instructions from the computer. And like GPS, if it's not easy to set up, people are just not going to use it. They're just going to, out of just taking shortcuts and doing it quickly, will not stop and start entering slowly the address. So as soon as you make it really easy to get access to the technology starts to catch fire. And that's what we're really focused on making it super easy and reliable and flexible. So I think the accuracy-wise, we got to the accuracy that's needed. We will continue to improve the accuracy. And also, I think in terms of being able to accommodate the full range of different procedures that are done in the mouth and could be benefiting from higher accuracy, we kind of address that too. So our main focus is on just making it super easy and reliable.
So ClaroNav, makers of Navident and NaviENT. That's the other one.
NaviENT, yeah.
What's that?
NaviENT.
And what does the ENT stand for? Is it ear, nose, and throat? Is it what is the? So ClaroNav, the navs are navigation. What's the Claro for?
The company was founded by a friend of mine called Claudio and myself, Doron. So when we launched the company, we didn't have a clear idea of where we're going to go. So decided to just combine our names. Claudio and Doron is Claron.
Cloudy and what?
And Doron. Claudio.
What was the other name? Claude?
Claudio. Claudio is Italian.
How do you spell it?
Claudio.
So Claudio and Doron.
Yeah, so combine the names together, you get Claron.
That is hilarious. I never would have met that. So then talk about the other two names.
Okay, so Nav was obviously, as you mentioned, is navigation, and Navident means navigation in dental. And then we had, at the same time, we developed a product for sinus surgery, ENT, so we called it NaviENT. But then we also created a version of it for brain surgery. And in order not to, because it's all surgeries around the skull, we decided to just keep the name NaviENT, and which is also, it can come from being sentient, being with a thinking brain. And so NaviENT is all those procedures that are related to the skull and the head, and but except the mouth, which is a different type of surgery altogether, and so that's Navident. So there's NaviENT for ENT, and there's NaviENT for cranial procedures in the brain, and we will probably be shortly adding other procedures around the neurological system.
So in dentistry, is it all dental implants, or are there any other things like endo, or what does that market look like for navigation?
Yeah, so we started with implants, but kind of the users discovered the Endo application, especially for calcified canals, and started to get very enthusiastic about it. So right now, I would say Endo is the one that users are most excited about, but we have to go back to the FDA and get clearance. At least in the US market, we cannot promote it. People are doing it off-label.
And what do you think of that? I mean, if you only lived in two countries, Israel and Canada?
Yeah.
And then 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border, so they're extremely familiar with this country. Do you think everything in life is a trade-off? You just can't say good versus bad. So that FDA regulation and everything, do you think for the average American Joe that that's a good thing, or is it a bad thing?
I think it's definitely a good thing because the FDA imposes a minimum level of quality control on the companies that sell healthcare products in the US. Sometimes they can be quite burdensome, but they're really trying hard to reduce the level of burden. They actually even ask you to tell them when we think that they're too burdensome, and there's a special officer that you can contact and say, you know what, I think they're asking too much of us, and they will go in and do an investigation to see if that's the case, which is really nice. They started to become more and more strict over the years, but I think that's because they were a bit too lax like 20 years ago, and so they started to introduce more and more controls over the companies. The main issue is that they're sometimes kind of slow. You know, we just now are trying to meet them to discuss the new indications for the technology, and just to get a meeting with them, it's like takes us 3 months just to discuss what we need to do in order to do it, and then obviously you have to apply, and then wait another 6 to 9 months, and so, you know, if they would have been faster, it would have been better, but I can understand that you have so many people and so many applications they have to handle. But overall, I would say FDA is definitely a positive thing for the American public, and I wish there would have been a central international authority rather than having to do the same thing again and again in different countries. China is also very, very strict and expensive. Brazil is very strict and lengthy. And just every country you have to go through the whole thing, and it puts a huge barrier on the companies to enter those markets.
So right now you're of all your products, what are you the most prized about? Is it Navident implants? Is it Navident Endo? Is it NaviENT? What has got your lion's share focus right now?
Well, we have actually a third product, which is Micron Tracker, which is the tracking system that's embedded in Navident is also offered as a separate product, and it has found its way into robotics. So we're collaborating with various robotics companies to track the tools that the robot is holding and the anatomy that it's operating on. And we're also entering robotics ourselves. We have a number of projects in the making that haven't yet been on the market. So altogether, I think we have a lot of synergy between the different projects. So advancement in the tracking technology finds its way, obviously, to our own products and into robotics products that are developed by our partners, and into our own robotics products. And so there's a lot of stuff is happening all the time. There's as you mentioned in the beginning, we actually introduced 2 generations of Navident in a very short while, Navident 1 and then Navident 2, which Navident 2 has been a big step forward from Navident 1, and obviously there are more generations to come and more technology that would be integrated into it, and we're foreseeing very rapid evolution in the next few years.
So how many employees do you have now?
We have about 32 or 33, about 20 of them here in Toronto, and the rest in different places in the world where they're serving the different markets. In North America, we sell Navident directly with our own salespeople. Outside of North America, we have distributors and support people for the distributors.
And that's a, Amazon's making everybody revisit that decision. Every year when you go to the Greater New York meeting for the last 3 or 4 years, Amazon has had a booth. But nobody, they're still all going through Patterson, Shine, Benco, Burkhardt. So you sold direct with your own force, and you've gone through distributors. Again, back to the dentist. What's the advantage for him when his companies are calling them direct or through a distributor? Or what do you think the trade-off is between those two?
Well, the main thing is that the dentists need to be trained to use the technology effectively. And as you know, no two patients are exactly the same. So even if you did well on the first few patients, you may run into a new situation a short while later, and you need to call someone to help you. The technology is pretty elaborate, and there are many different options and different ways of doing things, and you need to find how to best do something. So I would say if it's something like an impression material, obviously you could order it from Amazon or eBay or whatever. It's also all the same. There's no need for a distributor for that. But if it's a sophisticated technology, especially if it's one that's not being taught in any school, you have to learn it directly from people who know how to do it, and therefore you need to be in contact with with someone who's very knowledgeable. And obviously, Amazon doesn't have those people.
And so, what do you think is going to be bigger, the implant or the Endo system?
I don't want to forecast too far. I mean, I think that the general market for implants is significantly bigger, just in terms of the number of procedures and money that goes into it, than the type of endo procedures that are challenging to the point where you need a navigation system. But it's hard to know. I think we're also adding additional features and applications to the system. So it's going to go beyond just those two applications, and it remains to be seen if you look at all the applications put together, which segment of the market will take off, which geography, which type of dentist. I mean, right now, I think probably we're kind of spread evenly across the different specialties. Perio, OMS, general dentistry, and Endo now is entering the picture. I think probably more and more will go into the GPs, because they're just doing a wider range of procedures, and they also need more sophisticated technology to do the more difficult cases, because they don't have the experience of thousands of cases they can rely on.
So who would be your major competitor to ClaroNav, Navident? For image, for dynamic image navigation.
Yeah, so the only other competitors we see in the market is X-Guide, developed by XNav, an American company. Since neither one of us publishes specific numbers, we cannot tell which one has a larger market share. We strongly believe we evolved the system much faster, added more features, made it more flexible. Our system is much more compact. So we think we're getting ahead, but we don't know for sure. They are sold or distributed by Nobel Biocare, so they have some advantage in terms of just market presence, more salespeople out there.
And which company is that you're talking about?
It's called XNav Technologies. X-NAV.
Oh, X-NAV. And then who and where are they out of?
They're out of Pennsylvania in the U.S.
And so you have that, and then anybody else?
Not really. I mean, there are a few other companies. There may be 5 or 6 other companies that show up at trade shows, but we never run into them, never lose a sale to them, so we don't really see them. And in fact, when the market currently is at such an early stage, it's in infancy, so that we don't think competition is really that.
What did you think of?
We don't pay that much attention to competition. We pay much more attention to making the system more attractive and getting people to understand what it does and how it does it, and so on.
Well, what do you think about image navigation?
What do you mean by image navigation?
It's just another company that kind of does what you do.
IGI, that out of New York. Yeah, there used to be an Israeli company called Denex, and their navigation system didn't go very far, and they kind of started going into the simulation educational market. And then later on, they went out of business, and their assets were bought by this small group of investors out of New York City. And we do see them from time to time at trade shows, but we never ever run into them, and we don't really see them as a significant presence in the market. But
so basically, it's a very big market. The dental implants and the clear aligners is the only part of the market growing double digit. So the planet's got 8 billion people, 2 million dentists. The United States has 211,000 licensed dentists. So the United States has about 10% of the dentists. And when you look at something like implants, I mean, you have everything from guys who have placed 5,000 implants using a pano. Like when I got my diplomat in the International Congress of Oral Implantology and all that, nobody was using an MRI or a CBCT. The pano was the new hot thing. So now you have a CBCT. Is this image navigation for people who are more high-tech? Is it because they don't trust their surgical skills? Is it to avoid malpractice? Who are your customers? Because obviously, when guys tell me, well, you can't place a CBCT you can't place an implant without a CBCT. Okay, so you're telling me that I know 20 dentists in my lifetime that placed 20,000 implants on a pano. What, they didn't exist? Are they ghosts? Was it a hallucination? So who is your customer? Why are they doing this as opposed to not? Why do they want help?
Well, the system makes you a better surgeon. I would say if you're very highly experienced and really, really good at placing implants because you've done it thousands of times in the past, we're talking only about implants, not endo, then I think the main thing that you're getting, if you're really, really experienced, is that you're getting the real-time view of what's actually happening in the bone when you're drilling into it. And a lot of them appreciate it because it gives them peace of mind and allows them to push the envelope, so to speak, in the kind of margins they're taking around what they're doing. The beginners probably should not start by immediately relying on the navigation system. They should start with really simple cases with a very large margin. So I would say probably our market are people that have done at least a few dozen procedures of placing implants and are trying to move away from doing the only very simple one implant in a very wide, strong bone away from any dangerous structure, which is the majority of the market. Now, in terms of who we're selling to today, because it's such an early days for the technology, most of our customers are customers that are kind of very innovation-minded. They want to try the new and the exciting, and they want to push the boundaries, improve their skills, and then start telling to their colleagues what they have done. The great majority of the market kind of sits on the fence and waits until the users tell them, it's a great technology, I use it all the time, it never fails, it's really worth the investment and so on. And this takes time. Those markets, they have a very long constant of growth.
And when those, so you're saying it's not an entry-level product. Most of your new client customers have placed over 1,000.
I'd say over 1,000, but I would say at least over 100.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm old and deaf. So you're so they place over 100. How does it break down? Oral surgeon, periodontist, general dentist?
As I said, it's roughly equal from what we've seen today. They're kind of roughly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and we also have endos. Again, they're using it off-label and not in the US, but we're starting to see a lot of interest from the endos. And hopefully once we get FDA clearance, we can then start selling it as an endo product. The endo surgeons, I think anyone who's dealing with the older population with calcified canals and so on would be able to greatly benefit from that.
And how much does the Navident system cost?
We're selling it at around, I mean, we have a few models and different stuff, but, kind of ballpark $30,000.
And is that in cash? Do you what percent of the dentists who buy this finance? And do you carry your own paper? Do you outsource your financing?
We outsource our financing to companies that do that locally, because obviously different places have different companies. Many times they bring their own leasing company, but I don't know. I cannot tell you offhand what percentage lease versus buy.
And when they buy that for $30,000, what is the name? Is it just one? Is it just the Navident, or is there different models of it, or what is it?
Yeah, so we have the standard, we have the Pro. The standard is less than 30,000. The Pro is more than 30,000, but they're roughly around that.
The standard is 30,000.
I don't remember. I mean, again, different countries have slightly different prices.
Yeah.
Different, but in the US, I think, again, don't catch me on that because I'm not the head of sales and I don't have the price list in front of me. But it's roughly, I think, 28 for the standard and 33 for the Pro, if I remember the numbers correctly.
And do you know what percent pay cash versus finance?
Again, I don't know. I know that we get the money pretty quickly, and when we like half before the order and half after the order, but some of that goes to the leasing company. The leasing company gives us the money, but I don't know offhand what the percentage is.
And what is your best way of getting this message out? I mean, what generates the most sales? Is it over-the-shoulder implant courses? Is it what generally creates a sale for you?
It's usually through trade shows and courses. And the courses in Europe, they're usually being delivered by surgeons who themselves got acquainted with the system and became an expert. We have a network of master clinical trainers. Same thing in East Asia. In the US, we started to deliver courses by the master clinical trainers. We just entered the US market later because we had to go through the FDA there, and it took longer than for the other markets. And but we also provide our own courses here in Toronto and in other places. Again, from the top of my head, I would say maybe half comes through the courses and half comes through trade shows where they come to our booth, they see it, or they heard it from a friend and they say, okay, please follow up after the meeting, or sometimes they just buy it on the spot.
Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you're an implantologist, you're already using a CBCT. And so you've already spent $60,000 to $100,000 there. If you're a chairside miller, you got a CAD cam, that's another $135,000. So the price is so low. That's what I was wondering. I just kind of curious about my homies. If for $30,000 they just write you a check, or if they're so much debt and cash flow issues that they finance that for 5 years, kind of just trying to get a check. And you,
I think most actually pay cash. I mean, I don't think many financing. The majority just pay cash. Sometimes, as I said, they just give you the down payment there on the floor. They just write you a check or they charge you to the credit card.
And I thought you would have said that the number one reason to drive it is such precision that they don't have to worry about a lawsuit from hitting a nerve or a sinus or whatever. But you're not saying. But you didn't say that. You said it was more they like the technology, they like the precision. They've already placed 100. Who do you think your customer is?
Yeah, I think it's people who are trying to get better. I think it's people who are committed to becoming a better dentist or a better surgeon over time. That's kind of the major thing, and they're open to trying new things together because. As I said, you can avoid lawsuits by being very cautious, and you can avoid lawsuits by taking a lot of apical x-rays while you're doing it, and maybe taking even a CT or two during the procedure to make sure you're not approaching anything and so on. You can be, if you're a careful person, you could be very careful with our system. But again, it costs you with time, it costs you overhead, it just doesn't flow as easily as that when you see in real time all the time what's actually going on as you drilling and cutting. So it's people who are just trying to get peace of mind when they do things beyond the basic pedestrian, super easy procedures.
So basically is, how do you pronounce his name? Endo Bermanes?
Yeah, Endo Berman is, yeah.
And he does every other week he does a over-the-shoulder program in Toronto.
Once a month, I think it's the first Saturday of every month he's doing it. But we have people that go to places where there's a gathering of some dental society, and they can deliver a course, or they organize a meeting to do an over the shoulder at one of our customers, or things like that.
And how's Endo like it?
Well, he loves the system. He's a dentist himself.
Right.
He actually came from Israel like I did. And then when he came to Canada, he got excited by the new technology that's the digital revolution in dentistry, and decided he wanted to work on the technology side rather than just do more cases. And so he joined us and helped develop the system, giving us guidance on the clinical side of the development, and then started training users and helping write the user's manual and the training courses and training the distributors and so on.
So Dentaltown, I mean, they love this stuff. There's a thread. I mean, if you do a search for dynamic navigation or XNav, this guy says this is such cool technology. It's fascinating that everything is done optically. That must. He's another guy, Julius Hyatt. I am a user of XNav. I have no financial interest in this product. The dynamic visualization improves my precision and accuracy. They just really, really love it. So they're paying. So what about the procedure? Does it make you go faster? So they're going to pay. You got to answer the question. Why should they spend $30,000? Why not just freehand this thing? Why not just be the surgeon, the one you always see on TV?
Yeah, again, if you do freehand, you're taking risks, and the only way you can reduce those risks, as I mentioned, is by taking lots of X-rays and CT even, and so on during the procedure to make sure you're not off and you're not hitting something or whatever, unless, again, you're doing something really simple. If you have like a thick cortical bone and a mandible nowhere near the mandibular nerve, you can stick an implant in there, and just a single implant will be okay. But if you're doing multiple implants in marginal cases right next to the nerve canal, so then you're facing the dilemma if you're going to do bone augmentation while you're doing that, and bone augmentation requires more time. Obviously, it's more expensive and so on. Or you're going to use a technology that allows you to be more precise and at a similar level of risk, put it in the right place and without the bone augmentation. Or you can do more complicated and risky procedures such as, say, bone reduction and so on, without, again, being afraid of hitting the nerve because you're seeing what you're doing. Or if you're trying to extract a third molar that is sitting right around the nerve. So you can just do more complicated, more difficult, challenging procedures, expand your customer base, and also provide your customers peace of mind, not just yourself, because they know you're actually seeing where you are. So kind of those are the key arguments here. Just you can take on more difficult challenges and do it more efficiently, and you can get peace of mind while you're doing it. It's also easier on the back. You don't have to bend all the time over the patient to see what's happening inside the mouth, because you're looking at the screen in front of you, so you sit upright. And so it's kind of a more relaxed, laid back, easy way to do the same things that otherwise you've been very tense and bent over and nervous.
Does Bifida have one on Dentaltown? Biff Uvula. His real name is what is his real name? Adonis Terzides.
I don't know him. No.
He's the biggest oral surgeon on Dentaltown, and he's their gifted deal. I wonder. I know on Dentaltown, the first thing everyone is going to ask is what does he think of that, or Jay Resnick. Jay Resnick in L.A. Who would you say is your biggest key opinion leaders?
Okay, so I mean, we have people who have used the system and praised it and so on the podium. But if I would, but we have a few people who actually really became expert at using the technology. So a few names come to mind is Sylvia La Rosa. She's out of Washington State, Tacoma, I think. We have George Mandelaris in Chicago. We have a few others around. We have Isaac Tawil in New York.
You said Julius Hyatt in, did you say Julius Hyatt?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought you said Hyatt. But anyway, so
there's Tate Anderson. There's I just like kind of names that come to mind, but we have quite a few people who are doing a lot of procedures and became experts and can teach others, which I really appreciate.
So then, what's next for you then? It sounds like this is your biggest dental product. So do you try to stay focused on the dental products? I mean, I know so many companies. Like a dentist, I'll give you an example. A dentist, you look at their last 5 years' behavior, and not even 1% of their revenue is occlusion, TMJ, headaches, but all their investment, and they spend week after week at these institutes, and so they chase things that's not the highest return on investment. So for you, what is your highest return on investment in this company? Is it staying focused on dental implants? Is it getting out more machines? What is the goal to be focused?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're very product and technology focused, and we believe that the product needs to be extremely easy to learn and to use, and require as little time as possible to set up. So we're very focused on developing solutions that just make every step in the procedure very easy and quick. And this is a huge challenge because, again, there's such a wide variety of jaws, and some of them have lots of teeth, some of them have natural teeth, some of them have a lot of crowns of different materials, very super structures made of metal that create a lot of artifacts in the CT. Some of them have motion inaccuracies because the patient was moving during the scan. You have to be able to attach to each and every jaw and track it during the surgery because the jaw is not fixated. And that's a major challenge to do it for all the types of jaws and without any complicated preparations, without the patient complaining that it's inconvenient. And you need to be able to register the patient to their study, to the image, which is always a challenge, again, because of the fact that the CT itself is not always that clear and reliable. If you need to put extra structures into the mouth when you scan, it adds another scanning step to the procedure and another preparation step to the procedure, which is another headache and overhead and where things can go wrong. So it's just working very hard on simplifying it, making it really reliable and flexible. And we're making a lot of progress. We've made many improvements to the product in the 3.5 years or so that it's been in the market. And we foresee a lot of improvements. We're going to introduce robotics as well into the mix. We think there's future for robotics in dentistry, although it's not those big, arm thing that is being shown all over the place. So there's a lot of innovation is coming out, from us to the market in the next 2 years.
So
obviously I'm not going to tell you the details, but whatever progress we made in the last 3 years is going to continue and even speed up in the next 2.
So what's the different roles between the two co-founders? I mean, you and Claudio Gotti and you, Doron Dekel, which that name blended into Claron Technologies. How do you guys have different functions, or how does that work?
So you briefly mentioned the history of the company at the beginning. After we founded the company, and that was almost 20 years ago, we bootstrapped the company without taking money from the outside for many years, until the company reached a point where it became very attractive for a takeover. And we have an American company named Lexmark that's famous for its printers, but doesn't exist anymore. But anyhow, at the time they came over and they wanted to buy us. And we looked at what they were interested in, and we said, okay, you're not really interested in surgical navigation, which was part of the technology we developed, so we'll sell you the rest of the company. But they wanted one of the founders to go with that part, so Claudio went with that part of the company to Lexmark. And I was left with a small group of the business that was just making its first steps. I think we had revenues of maybe $150,000 in the year before we got acquired from the surgical navigation business. And we decided to focus very heavily on Navident, on the dental market. So I was left with that group and developed the Navident market product and went into the market with it. Then after the minimum number of years that he needed to stay there, which was 3 years, he actually took the last year mostly off, but then he joined me again, and he started looking into other products that we're developing. So he's focusing on some of the new technology that will be coming out to market in the next 2 years, and I'm focused mainly on Navident itself.
So, if you had to do it all over again, would you sold that? I mean, was that worth all that trauma and noise and all that to do that, or was it something that you had to do, or would you and Claudio, if you could do it all over again, have not done that?
No, we would have definitely sold. That was a great thing. We both thought it was great. If nothing else, it gave us enough money to do whatever we wanted, and we found out that what we wanted would be to continue to do the same thing. So, but we were able to bringing new technology into a market like dental is very costly, and so we were able to have the buffer of cash that we needed to continue doing that. Plus, obviously, enough personally to not to have to worry about making money anymore.
And you're in Toronto, which America, most everyone, their biggest enemies themselves. I mean, everybody always wants to worry about aliens and the coronavirus and criminals. Like they buy a gun for their own safety, but if they ever kill anyone with that gun, it's going to be themselves. If you ask anybody what made America great, people will say, well, it was 500 years of immigration. And after 9/11, the United States was really shut that down, and it's had a material impact on R&D. A lot of Silicon Valley now is going up to Canada. But, I mean, when I saw Hong Kong, their lease expire, and have to be turned over to the original founders, China, Canada was the genius that said, hey, you can all come here. And Silicon Valley was like, please, can we do that? And, it's crickets. And so are you having is one of your limits programmers, and are you glad you're in Canada? Because I think you have your country has the highest percentage of college graduates and the highest percentage of citizens born in another country. So for a very high-tech thing like that, is that a really good thing in Toronto? Or in fact...
It's really, really great. Yeah. First of all, almost all of the high-tech in at least in Toronto is flooded with immigrants that Canada didn't have to spend the resources to bring up to the level where we be qualified. Imagine if you have a new baby born, you have to spend 25 years or 30 years to bring them up to the level where they're qualified to develop sophisticated technology. And Canada just gets it by opening the gate and saying you can come. And I can tell you, recently, since we're expanding our robotics workforce, we opened a position for robotics engineer. And I got, within a month, I had 420 resumes of people, a lot of them quite qualified from top universities, including, Stanford and Purdue, with PhDs applying for the job. And so I had just, eventually I decided to hire more than we needed just because the people were so good. I think in Toronto, there's an average of about 350 people that arrive in the city every day to settle in it. And quite a lot of them are very highly qualified. So just, there's a constant stream of highly qualified people that just comes here. And it's super, really, really good.
Yeah, I think Canada is crushing it. And America, it's sad when you see your mother country that just it seems like the best thing this country knows how to do is just shoot itself in the foot, and then when it's just tough. But
You'll recover. I'm sure. We trust you.
you trust us? It must be kind of wild living by next door to this country. So do you, endodontist? So you think? Well, no, I'm going to go next to robotics because I think implants. China's already had a robot place its first implant. There's a robotics implant company. It seems like the fastest growing segment of the market is obviously implants and clear aligners. Next is probably endo and endo retreatments, but endo retreatments is falling because people just are too quick to pull the tooth and do and put an implant. In fact, when you look at the apicoectomy data, it looks like it went the way of the dodo bird. But robotics seems like the thing to do next. I mean, I'm Irish, so I want to be able to stay home, drink beer in my jacuzzi while the robot goes to work and places the implant. How many more weeks until that's available?
The robot placing the implant, that's a long way off, and not necessarily that desirable. I think we need to have the surgeon in the loop, and that will stay there for quite a long while. Like, I don't know what will happen more than 20 years in the future, but at least in the next 20 years, that's not going to happen. So our viewpoint is that the robots should boost and assist the surgeon, not really replace them in any meaningful way. Our goal is to make the dental surgeons better, not to in any way replace them.
Yeah, and the other thing to you young kids, I got to tell you, now that, I've done this 3 decades, when you're 25, you think everything's going to happen in the next week or year or two. And it takes a long time to realize that. I mean, America's economy, I got out of high school in 80, now it's 2020. In 40 years, it's only grown 1.5% to 3%. But if you go back and look all the way back to the pyramids, I mean, there's 1,000-year stretches with no growth. I mean, when high tech came out, when they had the movie and the phonograph, they looked at that for 40 years before they added them together. So everything takes so much longer. In fact, if you look close at AI, hell, AI's been around at IBM since 1950, and it's 2020, so it's already 70 years old. And what he just said to you was it's going to be, if you're thinking that a robot and a computer and your iPhone's going to replace an implant surgeon, maybe, but not in the next 20 years, right?
Not in our lifetime.
Yeah. And everything takes so much longer than it would ever need to. Looking at, so what's your status on robots now? What's your next step with robotics?
Yes, I'm not going to go into details for obvious reasons. I mean, we don't necessarily want to pre-announce exactly what will happen, but the general statement I can make is that our company was always into doing things in a very minimalistic way to try to make it small and lightweight and low cost and compact and light. Yeah, so that's kind of our direction. We think that especially in surgery, especially in dentistry, where you have a very small space to work in, and both inside the mouth and around the patient, the future is not big robots that sit on the floor and require a large space around them. We think that we're going in the direction of miniaturizing everything and doing everything in a very small and precise way, rather than like big, heavy arm.
Well, you know why? So the robot, you think it's gonna, when it does come to dentistry or these functions, you think it'll be more implants or endo?
Well, both, but again, the idea here is to make the surgeons more accurate by helping them. The whole idea behind digital dentistry is to plan things on the computer screen. And then once you decide what you're going to do on the computer screen, you have to transfer your plan to the actual patient. And if you do it just by using your imagination, you're obviously imprecise. When it comes, for instance, to placing implants, if you're doing it with your imagination, the tip of the implant will be typically around 2.5 to 3 millimeter off from where you put it on the screen, and the angle can be 20, 30 degrees off in some cases, and this is kind of the averages. In some cases, it's much worse, and those outliers are really the worrisome ones. And our goal is to reduce that difference between what you drew on the screen and what actually happened inside the jaw to below 1 millimeter, hopefully maybe much less than that. And so the whole focus here is in procedures where that kind of accuracy makes a difference, and to do it in a way that's not intrusive, minimally intrusive, I'll call it, so that you don't actually do something that's very different from what you do anyhow. It's just more accurate.
And right now, there might be a lot of people listening to say, well, I think I'm doing it real accurate because I'm taking a CBCT, so I'm not doing 2D panos. I got 3D imaging. I'm using a surgical guide. So if he's driving to work thinking, okay, I already have a CBCT and I'm using a surgical guide, how could your navigation system be better than that?
Okay, well, if you could know everything in advance and you have the full information and you do the best plan, then yes, indeed, a robot could do it and a surgical guide will always work and so on. But the truth is that the CT is not reality. Many times what you see in the CT, when you actually go and start a surgery, you find out that what looked like a strong bone is actually not so strong, and what looked like soft tissue is actually bone, and things are different. Or that the patient, as I mentioned, moved, and that's quite common, especially with the stand-up CBCTs. Patients are kind of restless and they don't stay in one place, so that what you see in the CT is actually somewhat distorted because of the movement, or because of artifacts from metal and from other things, or there's a whole bunch of reasons why the CT is not reality. And when you actually start the surgery, you find out in a surprisingly high number of cases, from our experience, somewhere between 30 to 50% of the cases, you decide that the plan that you made on the screen needs to be adjusted. Maybe you want to use a longer implant. Maybe you want to change the angle. Maybe you want to accommodate it a slightly different direction. And with the guides, first of all, you cannot change it at all. Second of all, you don't even know whether it's accurate. So for instance, when you place it on the jaw, maybe someone made some mistake and put the sleeves in a different position than was intended, and or maybe when you positioned it on the jaw, you didn't position it properly, or maybe when you drilled, you actually bent it a bit because there was a large gap, and plastic is elastic, and you have no way of verifying that you're actually accurate. So you're drilling into the unknown, and I've seen quite a few cases where the implants ended up at a very different place than what they thought they would end up. With the dynamic navigation system, so first and foremost, as the name implies, you can change the plan on the fly. Second of all, you know how accurate you are because you touch a few locations, the cusp, the buccal cusp, and see if it actually shows you that you are on the buccal cusp on the screen. And if it's not accurate, you can redo the registration to get it to be more accurate. So you have a way of correcting it, and then when you start drilling, you see discrepancy between what you see on the screen and the patient. You can just adjust the plan on the spot. You just stop for a second, adjust the plan, and continue going, and now the computer directs you to a new plan. So it's like you driving the car with a GPS, and you run into a traffic jam, or you decide to change your mind. You just go into a different route, and the GPS updates the route, and you go a different route. A third reason is that those surgical guides require quite a lot of preparations in advance, and that's timely and costly. And with the dynamic navigation system, you can even decide in the middle of surgery, oh, you know what, I'd like to navigate that. So you just turn it on and navigate it on the spot. And so you have that. And both of them require an upfront investment in getting the specific toolkit and specific program and so on. Maybe with the dynamic navigation system, it's a bit higher. The dynamic navigation system, there is a learning curve that is longer than with guides because they're relatively simple. But you get the payback because after a few cases, you become really very efficient with how you use the dynamic navigation system, and you get rid of all those preparations. And either if you do it yourself, you have to be really smart on how to design the guide so it will sit properly, and the sleeves will be in the right place. There are also some other reasons. For instance, because the drill has to drill through a sleeve, the drill has to be long, and so especially in the distal area of the jaw, sometimes you just cannot fit the long drill in because the patient cannot open their mouth that much, and then you're stuck. So you have to throw away the drill, and the guide. And the guides can break, and so you may end up in a situation where you made a big investment in the guide and just don't use it. And that's not so unusual.
So going forward, I mean, you're basically the leader in this. You've been in it for a long time. This is your kind of industry. Do you think going forward it will be an open platform where different pieces and different companies work together? Like let's talk about Neosys. I mean, they're a robotic with the Yomi, so that's a robot company in existence. Do you see going forward that if someone had your system for image navigation and had this system, they would work together, or do you think it's going to be more closed?
I guess even today, we can take a plan that was done in a different system and load it into our system and guide it. So in a sense, it's kind of open in that you can do planning on different systems and then guidance on a different system. We haven't never gotten any request to integrate with Yomi, so I don't know if it's easy to do, but for most cases, it's relatively easy to do. Because of the fact that you may want to change the plan on the fly, we believe many people would find it much easier to just plan it directly on our system. A lot of the difficulty in planning when you have a guide is the design of the guide itself, other than where to place the implants. We've added quite sophisticated functionality to the system of designing the crowns, designing abutments we're shortly introducing, of course, the implants themselves, and then also we added functionality for designing cuts, which is also becoming quite popular. So it's, for instance, if you do a ridge split, or if you do bone reduction, if you do a picoectomy or things like that, you can just plan the cut plane, and then the system will guide you to cut where you planned, which is exciting new technology.
There's an oral surgeon on Dental Town, and he writes on your deal. He says about you. He says, "I still use it for almost every case. I'm so glad I got it, and believe I am a faster, more accurate, and safer implant surgeon using it." So why do you think an oral surgeon who only does surgery benefits from this system? Why? What do you think? What part of the procedure do you think he's enjoying?
But as I said, the issue is kind of getting the real-time view of where you are. We're looking at the analogy to GPS. So just having a map on the screen in your car that shows you where the car is and what are the names of the street you're passing and what is the path and so on. You could be a very good driver, but you still want to know where you are. And this is something that you cannot get any other way. So I think that's the main benefit to even highly experienced surgeons, that they know where they are and they can change their mind, and they can, as I said, cases where they currently do bone augmentation, they can maybe get along without the bone augmentation. Maybe they want to try something like pterygoid implants, which a very good solution for an atrophic maxilla, but people are afraid of doing it because it's kind of considered a dangerous procedure without guidance. So one of our users, for instance, started doing a lot of pterygoid implants, and he says that he feels completely safe, and he always knows exactly where he is, and he's never gonna hit that canal that they're very afraid of hitting, the how's it called, the greater palatine canal, with the artery there, and they're very afraid of the bleeding. With the navigation system, he's not afraid, and he's doing it, and it's very safe. It's much faster because it doesn't have to take the x-rays all the time. And so even though you're very, very experienced and you've done a lot of stuff, it just allows you to do more and allows you to do it with confidence and with peace of mind.
Now, endodontists are interesting because they, you're saying retreating canals with this. That would be interesting because a lot of them tell me that a lot of my friends that are prosthetonists and endodontists tell me they would love to get into implants, but it'll kill their referral deal. I got prosthodontists who say, I get all my cases, a third from general dentists, a third from periodontists, a third from oral surgeons, so they can't. Endodontists say the same thing. Are you seeing that this, if it's a high-tech endodontist who with channel conflict is afraid to start placing implants, that maybe he'll get his high-tech fix with your $30,000 toys? Because at the end of the day, and I'm serious here, boys need their toys. And I think that, there's a thread on Dental Town, this huge thread about dealing with burnout, depression, disease. And there's been several threads going on about that since we started in 1999. And I think that, when I put my 4 boys in the bathtub when they were little, if I put in a bunch of trucks and boats and balls, they'd stay in there for an hour. But if it was just a bar of soap in there, they'd jump out of the tub. Same with the sandbox, the beach. So I do think that if you rent a 1,000 square foot office and don't buy toys, but then you live in a 3,000 square foot home with a boat and fancy cars and big screen TVs, well, of course you hate your dental office and want to leave and go home. So I've always said that if it's not good for the goose, it's not good for the gander. If it's not good for your dental office, it's not good for your home. Like, I own my land and building in my dental office like I do my home. My home is it's about the same size. They're both about 4,000 square feet, and I've always split my toys evenly because I've seen dentists that the only reason they want to go to work is because they bought a laser. Again, the TMJ thing is the craziest because all my friends who are the most intense with Panky, Dawson, Ross Nash, they're just really want to be an occlusal expert. They only do like one case like that, maybe every year, or maybe 2 a year. What's paying their bills 99% of the time isn't where they get their thrills. I'll give you another case. I'm in Arizona where we have 2 dental schools, AT Still and Mesa and Midwestern. I can give you the names of 10 dentists that burned out on their Monday through Thursday, but they're still doing it and crushing it. But they work 1 day a week at the dental school for like, what is it, like $100 a day? I mean, some amount of money you could make before, your first break. But they do it because that's their passion. They love teaching, being around the kids, all the new stuff. So sometimes you're doing it for money. Sometimes you're doing it for mental health. Do you think this is more, if you had to break it down on your guess, what percent of your customers are buying it, boys have toys, mental health, this is so cool, versus I really need this to do my bread and butter dentistry?
Well, there's the adoption curve of new technology, and the people at the front of the adoption curves are the pioneers. And those are the people that get excited by those new toys. So I would say a large percentage of our current customers are those people who love the new toys, but that's not really where we believe our future is. So we're very grateful for them to really be super excited about each new innovation and wanting to test it and give us feedback and work with us. And they get really turned on by the innovation part of it. But I think there's something that maybe 2 to 3% of the market are like that. I think the great majority of the people really need to see that this is something that makes them better dentists and that gives them a return on the investment they're making, both in the purchase itself, but also on climbing up the learning curve and becoming proficient in the technology. So while we're super grateful to the pioneers and the boys that like the toys, that's not really where we're going in the long term. We're really going for bread and butter, doing an excellent job every time because you have more information in front of you when you're doing the job.
So you really feel that Endo is going to take off and be a big thing? You think what exactly Endo is it? You say it's going to help them find the canals, or what exactly?
Yeah, so let me first again make sure that I'm not trying to promote it in the American market because we don't have FDA clearance and we're forbidden from promoting it. So I'm walking a very tight rope here. So I can only talk about what our users are telling us and where we see this going, but I'm not actually trying to promote the technology as validated and safe for Endo. So just let me prefix whatever I'm saying next.
Okay, and if you're listening to me, if the government's listening to me, please go screw yourself. So continue.
But we do have customers that have been using it off-label, and what they're saying is that first and foremost, you're able to get directly to the canal without destroying the crown at all. So you're making this tiny hole, and you go straight there, and you clean the canal, and you put a filling in there, and that's it. So a lot of cases which might have resulted in the necessity to put on a crown, an artificial crown, because a large part of the crown, the natural crown, has been destroyed by the process, now will not be, and people will be able to go home without any further procedures that are very costly. We know that crowns are very, very expensive. Plus, your time and your stress is dropping a lot because you're just going straight for the canal, cleaning it, rather than trying again and again to find it, and the sweat beads are on your forehead while time is passing and the next patient is waiting outside and the clock is running. Especially for older patients, the canals become narrower and narrower as they calcify, and it becomes harder and harder to find them. And so that's kind of what we're being told. We haven't really promoted it. We haven't done any clinical trials and so on. So I cannot really promote it as such.
That is.
That's I think where it's going. Yeah.
So what were you hoping I was going to talk about today that I was did not talk about? Is there anything that you? I can't believe the hour went by that fast. That was the fastest hour ever. Was there anything that you were hoping that we were going to talk about that I did not?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, those are all the exciting things that I discussed. I think the major message here is that digital dentistry is about working on a virtual patient and a model of the patient in the computer. And then once you found the optimal plan for that patient, taking that plan and implementing it in the patient itself. And I believe that our approach, which is let's register the model with the actual patient and then show you where you are and where you are relative to the plan you made, is probably the most effective way of doing that. I think a lot of the hesitation of the market to adopt it has to do with the fact that the technology is evolving rapidly. So the common feedback we're getting is that, yes, it's definitely the future, but we'll wait until it stabilizes. That's kind of I think maybe the number one reason people like it but don't buy it, is that we want to see it stabilizing. And we're in this dilemma of, obviously, we want to make the technology better, and that creates this instability of moving forward all the time with more and more improvements. And we're willing to accept the fact that some users, the majority of the market, will stay away from actually making the investment until they feel that the technology is mature. But whomever is willing to go for it today, we're making sure that we're upgrading the people in the field either for free or for a very small incremental cost. So we haven't left any buyer, even the ones that bought the first system out there, out to dry. And that's going to be our focus in the future as well, to make sure that people continue to be upgraded and get the latest technology when it comes out.
Well, it's been an honor to podcast interview you. I've had so much fun. And this is really going someplace big. And thank you so much for taking a time out of your life. And it was enjoyable to be looking at Albert the whole time. Love that guy. Yeah, but so thank you so much for coming on the show today. And come back on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for showing so much interest in what we're doing.
Okay. Have a great day.